Hello and welcome back. And have you ever wondered what if Beth Greene survived the hospital standoff? Well, in today's video, that is what I'm going to look at and explore how The Walking Dead would have changed if Beth survived Season 5. So let's jump right into this and say, what is our scenario? And our scenario is that during the standoff at the Grady Memorial Hospital, Beth had to stand aside and let Rick give up Noah so that he could save her, which means Noah actually survives longer in this what if scenario, but as a slave. Dawn survives, and most importantly, Beth survives. For the rest of Season 5 and Season 6, Beth would be a key figure in helping Rick and the group to adapt to Alexandria and be this middle ground. She will help Rick's group become softer, but she will also help some of the Alexandrians become harder. She will become a moral figure and maybe a good heart for The Walking Dead, a lot like her father Herschel. And some key story moments in these seasons would be definitely helping Carl in the first half of Season 6 and the back of Season 5 to adapt to this new way of life. He has just gone through hell and no one really understands him. Maybe Enid does a little, but Beth is definitely there to be a key figure in Carl's development. And she would also help in Daryl's character development too, as if Beth is still around, Daryl and Beth would continue to grow closer and to become more like siblings, which would leave Daryl to open up more, and we'll get a lot more of Daryl's character development earlier on into The Walking Dead in Season 5 and 6, especially before Beth disappears off with Maggie in Season 7 and 8. I also need to mention, because there is no Noah in the group, there is no Detour in the journey to DC, which means Tyrese wouldn't be distracted and bit by a child walker. So Tyrese would make it all the way to Alexandria. However, I don't see Tyrese surviving Season 6. Tyrese will either die in either the attack with the wolves, because he has shown time and time again he doesn't feel comfortable killing. Maybe a wolf will get the upper hand and he would be killed because he showed mercy, or he would die in No Way Out from being bitten. If he survives that, there is no chance that Tyrese would survive the encounters with the whole saviors. He either dies at the lineup, which means Abraham would probably survive but then die during the war, or he would survive the lineup and die during the war because he is too kind of a person to be thrust into that situation. So Tyrese would survive an extra season or two at most if Beth never got killed, and if Beth accepted that she's having her place traded with Noah. So Noah stays in Atlanta, leads to him surviving a bit longer and Tyrese surviving a bit longer too. And back to Beth, throughout Season 5 and 6, she would become a trainee doctor just like Denise. So Alexandria would lose their surgeon at the end of Season 5, but gain 2 trainee doctors. And diving deeper into Season 6, Beth would have 2 key moments. One would be her first kill when the wolves attack at the start of Season 6. Beth would likely still be Alexandria, and when the wolves attack, Beth would probably be forced to take her first kill before Carol or Morgan get to her and take her to safety. So Beth would deal with the guilt of she's now killed a man during the No Way Out arc. After the arc, Beth would be more a background character again. She's back to learning how to become a doctor, she's helping people with Denise. But once Denise dies, Maggie gets sick, Beth doesn't know how to treat Maggie, so Beth then joins the group in the RV to head to Hilltop, which leads to Beth at the end of Season 6 being at the lineup. And her presence there won't change anything. However, she would go through everything that is there and be just as traumatized as everyone else. So she won't be an outsider trying to help people. And the main role of Beth in Season 7, Season 8 would be her helping Maggie recover. She would spend 2 seasons being Maggie's moral support. Maggie is now lost her husband, so she would be going through all this grief, and in the main show, she had no one to support her. She moved also away from all of her friends, so she was more or less isolated and trying to take over this new community. She would have Beth there to help her get through all of this, And Beth would be one of her key members within her inner circle. She would have Jesus, maybe Enid still, maybe not, and Beth. And these are the people that would help Maggie take over the hilltop and help Maggie deal with the trauma that Negan has left her. And by the end of season 8, Maggie would definitely be in a better place because Beth is still around and Beth helped her. So Maggie will not be as focused on that Negan needs to die. She might still end up acting like she does in season 9, episode 1 to 5. However, with Beth still around, it won't be as extreme, and maybe she can learn, like she did in season 11, to just live with this new world she finds herself in. So Beth has a key role in seasons 7 and 8 to get Maggie to that point. She would also be key in definitely season 8, with being probably one of the few medically trained people still around in the war. You had Sadiq. Beth's definitely there helping Sadiq. Now moving to season 9, and as I said, Maggie would still do the events which lead to Rick disappearing. Because Maggie's Maggie. Maggie keeps repeating herself. Even if Beth's still around, Maggie would have that relapse and do that. And then there's the 6-year time jump. I think this is where the biggest difference is. Maggie wouldn't leave because Beth is still around, and I don't see Beth wanting to uproot her life for Maggie. Beth has built something. She would become a key member of Hilltop. She would be the doctor as well as Enid. She's important to that community. She can't just leave because Maggie wants to leave. So with Maggie still around, characters like Jesus and Tara wouldn't become leaders. I still think Jesus would die because he would have still gone on that mission to go and save Eugene and Rosita, but we would get a very different back half of season 9 with Beth being a major character. Once Lydia ends up at Hilltop, Beth is a morally good character. She would want to try and help Lydia, and she would push Daryl to trying to keep Lydia around. However, like in the show, Daryl's hands are tied. He has to give up Lydia to stop a war. And this will lead Beth to being very angry with the situation. And when Henry tries to break out to go and save Lydia, Beth would go to join in Henry on that journey to try and save the girl. Daryl will be way more like, we need to go save them now, so he would leave a lot earlier with Connie, and those characters would go off and do the story that we saw in the back half of season 9 plus Beth. Because Beth is there and a key figure in trying to save Lydia, and maybe when you have that big conflict at the Whisperer camp with Alpha, Beta and Henry, and Beth is there, maybe she would confront Alpha, and this would make Alpha remember Beth for a bit later. And we move into the biggest change would be the Pikes. Because Beth is still around and Beth took an active interest in trying to save Lydia, I don't see Beth survive in season 9. I see that because Beth is a morally good person, she would try to save Lydia, and because of that, Alpha remember this, and Alpha would make sure she's as Pike. And that's how I see her story ending. We know that some of the Pike deaths were random, but the 3 big ones were all targeted. She killed Henry as punishment to Lydia. She then killed Enid because she's a doctor and a major character in Hilltop, and she killed Tara because she was the leader of the Hilltop. So I see Tara getting replaced, and she survives season 9, but Beth takes her place. So Henry is still killed because of defiance and punishment. Enid's a doctor and a key figure, so she still dies, and she would kill Beth also as a punishment, but also to kill a major character in Hilltop to weaken Maggie. She would realize that Maggie and Beth are related, and she can't get to Maggie, so she would kill Beth to be like, you could be next. So that's a warning to Maggie to weaken the community further. She can't kill a leader this time, but she kills the leader's sister. And that's how I think the season would end, and Beth's story would end, her being a Pike death. And moving on to season 10, and the biggest changes would be Tara is still around, but she's a minor character. She never becomes a leader, so she is just a grunt. So she doesn't really impact the story too much. But because Beth has died, and because Beth was still around, Maggie is still around, Maggie and Daryl would be unstable. They would be more like Carol. So we'd have 3 Carol figures, which would lead to a more chaotic and bloody war, I believe, as Daryl and Maggie would just destroy heaven and earth to try and get back at Alpha. So it's going to be chaotic, a lot more maybe minor character deaths, and maybe the situation would be a bit worse for them. However, they would still win the war because you have Carol releasing Negan. Negan would still kill Alpha, which will lead the war to suddenly end. So we would still get a good outcome, but it's just going to be a way more chaotic season 10 with all the main characters just being chaotic trying to kill Alpha, and maybe it'd be a race of them all trying to kill Alpha fastest. It could be something like that. But moving to season 10, and I think this would be almost exactly the same. Terra, still minor character, still kicking around, not really going to impact the story. But because of all the time jumps, Maggie and Daryl, just like how Carol did, they would get over that Beth's gone and they would sit back into their season 11 storylines. I think Maggie would probably have a slightly different starter. She lost Beth, so maybe she would regress again to going back to struggling with Negan, and then we would have Maggie now learning how to deal with Negan without the aid of her sister. So Maggie's storyline would be slightly tweaked, but overall, season 11 would be exactly the same. I don't think Beth's death in season 9 would impact this season so much. And that's my thoughts on what would happen if Beth survives season 5. She would live as long as season 9 in my personal opinion. I think because of her good morals, she would try and save Lydia, which would lead to her being a Pike death if she stuck around. However, this is just my personal opinion, so please tell me down below, do you agree with my what if, do you disagree? Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you later.